Hello and welcome to Word in the Burg, our monthly topical talk show about issues that matter to Harrisburg and the region. Today we are talking about sinkholes, and I'm pleased to be joined by City Engineer Wayne Martin and Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Harrisburg, Jackie Parker. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Let's start with what is a sinkhole exactly? I think in the public consciousness of Harrisburg, people remember the sinkhole that occurred on 4th Street. Now we're dealing with a sinkhole on South 14th Street. I know the causes for each of those sinkholes is different, but what is a sinkhole, Wayne?
Sinkhole is a subsidence feature, right? And so people, especially those from Pennsylvania, coal country, they think of collapsed mines and things like that. It's similar to a collapsed mine, which is also a subsidence feature, but different in how it was caused. Subsidence is the downward movement of the surface material into a cavern or some underlying hole or fracture. Sinkholes that we've experienced are typically geological underlying limestone geology that has weathered due to chemical weathering, water. Water is the mitigating factor in all of those, whether it's utility failure or natural.
So on South 14th Street, we're talking about an underlying limestone geology, which is really the root cause of the sinkholes there. If you live in Harrisburg, can you talk a little bit about where limestone geology exists and where you might need to be concerned about the possibility of a sinkhole?
Sure. The state has published maps that show the areas of limestone geology. Generally speaking, you're looking at the south side of 83, those homes in Harrisburg, city boundaries on the southern side of 83. Those maps are available through the state.
And Jackie, I know we will be convening a sinkhole summit this month, which we're very excited about. And one of the topics has to do with insurance. If you live in an area which is sort of grounded in limestone geology, would you recommend insurance to homeowners? Can they take advantage of various programs? What's out there?
Well, what we've discovered just from talking to insurance brokers is that there are riders for regular homeowners insurance that indicates you can have what they call sinkhole insurance. We've canvassed a few of the local insurance brokers, and they're indicating that it isn't that much to put it on for a year. And we are recommending that to probably any homeowner here in Harrisburg that feels that they're close to a fissure or is concerned about sinkholes in their area. And at the summit, the insurance commissioner or one of his staff members are going to be discussing the insurance in general and what people can expect from their insurance broker and carrier, and also what they probably cannot expect from an insurance carrier. So I think it'll be a very timely discussion.
So if you live on the south side of 83, if you live in an area which is clearly in the limestone geology portion of the city, as verified on city maps, and you haven't yet experienced any type of sinkhole formation, one thing you might want to consider is sinkhole insurance. Now, Wayne, the sinkhole on South 14th Street, rooted in limestone geology, a little different than what happened a few years ago in Harrisburg on 4th Street in uptown Harrisburg. That seemed to be a sinkhole whose root cause wasn't limestone geology. Can you talk a little bit about the difference?
Sure. What we know about the sinkhole that occurred on 4th Street years ago was there's sewer lines underneath those roads, and whether it's a lateral or failure of a sewer lateral, which is basically the pipe that connects the home or the building to the main line, which runs typically down the center of the street. If that were to fail, that could actually convey soils and stone and things of that nature down the sewer line. And so the sewer plant would be taking in that soil, that water, through those conveyance methods. On 14th Street, there is no sewer line under South 14th Street. So what we have there is we have, in a similar mechanism, the natural geology is allowing those soils to pipe away from the area, from underneath the street. If you think of cracks and breaks and things in rocks, often they're thought of as pipes. If you dump a glass of water on ground and there's underlying limestone geology, it's not going to go directly into the water table. It's going to go back and forth through the path of least resistance. Oftentimes, soil can follow that same path and cause sinkholes.
Right. So on 4th Street, we certainly have a problem of an aging infrastructure in the city of Harrisburg. There's no question about that. And that infrastructure sort of gave way in 4th Street and resulted in a sinkhole there. On South 14th Street, we did note the sinkhole because what happened was the water line broke. But the water line most likely broke, although it's not entirely conclusive, due to this underlying factor of the limestone geology, which put additional pressure on the water line. The water line then broke, washed away additional soil, and we had an emergency. Jackie, can you talk about what the city's response was initially when we first learned of the water line break and the sinkhole problem that had developed there?
Sure. We noted also from neighbors who were calling in that they were very concerned about even if they felt that they weren't affected, that block is a very tight-knit neighborhood and the homes are connected or close to each other. And everybody was concerned about what had happened and what could happen in the future. So we had a public meeting at one of the local churches where the neighbors could come in and talk to us and listen to reports of what we thought at the time was happening and acknowledge that there were sinkholes. And then also we inspected those homes that were directly affected, but then also the other neighbors who were nervous about the homes themselves, they said they would like an inspection, so we offered an inspection to anybody who had asked for one along South 14th Street. After that, we've been in communication with the people who we felt were most affected, and we continue to do that.
And another thing we promised to do at that meeting was to engage a qualified engineering firm that would be able to come in and really explain and map the root causes for what had happened. That firm was Gannett Fleming. And Wayne, can you talk a little bit about the initial survey that they undertook and what they discovered specifically to South 14th Street?
Absolutely. So their scope of work initially was to study the subsurface geology of the road and the sidewalks, the right-of-way, basically, the public right-of-way. So they did a linear survey of 3 lines, one the center of the road and one on each sidewalk on either side of the road. They used a seismic method, which basically records the ground stiffness, and in this during this method, you can basically tell the top of rock, which is important to interpret the underlying geology. They also did a core boring, which is basically they dug an 8-inch diameter hole down into the bedrock, or down into the limestone, rather, to verify the results they were seeing on this non-intrusive seismic study.
And what results did they find? What were the most important facts to take away from that original?
The center of the street, not the ends of the blocks near Magnolia, but basically in the center of the street, there were fractures, voids in the earth, things that have a high probability, of sinkholes reoccurring underneath that street.
And there's a map, which we will try and put up on the screen here for people to see, but it clearly showed fissure lines, a series of fissure lines cutting across the street from one home to another. And those lines coincided rather clearly to the houses that we had deemed unfit for human habitation or that were showing signs of structural problems or foundation problems. So we knew what the cause was. At the same time we were commissioning that study and we were trying to confirm the root cause of the problems, we were also trying to assist the families in terms of emergency needs and immediate relocation. Can you talk a little bit about our efforts there and what resources generally exist in Harrisburg?
Yes, the homes that were most directly affected and at which our codes person went in and deemed unfit for human habitation, the people had the opportunity to move to another spot. And through our Coalition on Homelessness, we have a large network of service providers that can also offer not only emergency shelter for a short period of time, but also for a longer period of time, again, depending on each individual situation. So we offered those services. Our network was there and very, very helpful. And they're still there. They're all the time for emergencies just like this. We're helping them with each homeowner with, again, different variety of needs, whether it was emergency shelter, sometimes it was rental assistance if they are renters. We connected them with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency so that they could discuss if there was a mortgage issue. Insurance, we did talk to them a little bit about that as well and tried to refer them, if we didn't know the answers, refer them to the appropriate people.
Let's tease those apart a little bit. From the standpoint of mortgage issues, we have a mixture of renters and homeowners on that street. Did we have any success in dealing with some of the mortgage holders?
It really turns out that if you own your home and you have a mortgage, that's a critical discussion that you have to have with your mortgage holder. Again, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency has a relationship with most banks, so they try to do some liaison work so that the mortgage owner would have an opportunity, if they got a little bit behind, to say, look, I have to find another place, I have to rent, and now I have a mortgage and I have a rent issue. So, and I think with some success, the mortgage holders were amenable to either writing off a mortgage and helping them get another mortgage if they were moving to another place, or at least allowing them to have some programs for if they get behind on the mortgage.
And how about insurance? Were any of the affected homeowners able to effectively invoke their sinkhole insurance policy?
Only very, very few had sinkhole insurance. Some people did, but most of them did not. And then the renters, of course, probably were in a better situation in some senses because they could find another place and we could offer them 3 months of rental assistance, and that if they would find another spot.
And how does the rental assistance work?
Again, through one of our service providers, through the Coalition on Homelessness, that would allow the person who's a renter to go out and find an equal place anywhere, really, that probably close to that location if that's where they'd like to live, and then they would offer them rental assistance for up to 3 months.
Mm-hmm. So Wayne, once we had addressed the immediate crisis of the families there, and we had done the first work order, which pointed to the sort of root cause of the sinkhole on South 14th Street, we made a decision to expand the scope to some additional work orders. Can you talk a little bit about what we decided to do next from an engineering standpoint?
Certainly. So we authorized 2 additional work orders, or I should say City Council authorized 2 additional work orders. The work order 2 was, okay, now that we know that there are fractures, fissures, as you described them, perpendicular to the road, how far do they extend? Do they go underneath the homes to other areas of southern Harrisburg, the adjacent roads and things like that? So we did a limited survey to determine the extent of those fractures and voids. That work is currently being done. I believe the data collection portion has been completed, and we expect the report sometime in the next week or 2. I've been told we'll have it before Thanksgiving holiday. The other work order 3, is preliminary designs and cost estimates of 2 things. One, what can we do temporarily, right? What can we do to try to mitigate the problem temporarily? We always use the term mitigate with sinkholes because we can never guarantee that the problem's going to be fixed. We can't solve underlying geology issues. We can only mitigate it so that to some reasonable degree of engineering certainty, we're not going to see a sinkhole there in our lifetime anyway. So that temporary design has been completed, and we're in the process of having work done, and that is just to temporarily seal the road until we figure out the long-term solution. The second part of that work order was, what are our options as far as long-term solutions? One is a low mobility grouting, where grout holes are dug at 10-foot intervals, and grout, maybe 2-inch to 3-inch diameter pipes, concrete, if you will, like a mortar mix, is pumped into the ground at 10-foot, like a grid pattern, and then what they call split shot grouting. So then you may go in between those holes. If that hole took a lot of grout, we know that there's something under there, you would do a split shot and put additional grout down in there. That combined with some overburden materials in the area of the utilities, which utility failures, gas, water, can be catastrophic, so we have to pay close attention to those areas. That's one option. The other alternative we'd like to look at the costs associated with would be selective home demolition and capping the area and making it like a green space. Just because, you know, we want to see both costs associated with those two alternates.
And we'll talk about the costs in a minute, because Gannett Fleming did provide some potential costs. A couple things. First of all, I think it's important to note that in terms of funding these studies, we, meaning the administration, worked very closely with City Council. And I think City Council shared the sense of urgency and commitment, and we utilized the funding for what is called the municipal host fee at the incinerator, which is basically a fee that the city of Harrisburg gets for having an incinerator here. And ironically, you know, this area of South 14th Street is right in the shadow of the incinerator. I think Council and administration both felt this was an appropriate use of that fee. Through a series of hearings, we encumbered a portion of that fee, and we've used that to fund these studies. We've also worked very closely with Capital Region Water. They have agreed to fund half of 2 of the 3 work orders from Gannett Fleming, and they are also willing to pay for the short-term fix, which is what you were describing, how we're going to fix the road. So let's talk about the short-term fix first, and then we can go back to the longer fix and the costs. What will residents, what will Harrisburg citizens see on South 14th Street as we move into the winter?
Okay. So the short-term fix will not make the road safe for public travel. This road will still be closed. What we want to avoid is a catastrophic failure where a vehicle or something of that nature collapses into the earth. Although that's unlikely given the type of topography, we can't take that risk. So the road will still be closed. However, it'll more or less resemble a paved road. Fortunately, we do have some road projects that are going to be undertaken this month, and some of the millings, they mill the road to put the new pavement down. Some of those millings will be placed on the road, and then an overlay, a bituminous overlay, to seal the top of the road to eliminate the potential for water. Like I said, water is the triggering mechanism, so we want to keep water out of that limestone, and that's what it'll look like a road. It won't be open as a road, but that's what will be there.
So in a convergence of fortuitous timing, we're able to actually take the millings from South 17th Street, which we're beginning to pave this year, and utilize those to fix the road, thereby cutting down on the overall costs. How much is it going to cost to just fix the road, and what has Capital Region Water agreed to contribute?
Capital Region Water agreed to pay up to $60,000. We anticipate it'll cost much less than that. We've yet, because of the costs associated with moving the millings from one place to the other, or not having to move the millings from one place to the other, I should say, we should see a credit for that, because originally under the contract those millings were going to be hauled for storage on another part of the city, which is much further away.
Wow. Okay, and we'll go back to the long-term mitigation plans in a minute, but the bottom line is they're expensive, And Jackie, I assume that one of the motivating factors behind the Sinkhole Summit, which we're hosting here in Harrisburg this week, was to bring attention to the problems of sinkholes, but also to really focus on what funding may be out there both on a state level and a federal level. And I know we're bringing our congressional delegation together to Harrisburg. But what are your initial thoughts on possible funding sources for dealing with sinkholes? And what do you hope to achieve more generally with the Sinkhole Summit?
Well, after discovering what was happening on South 14th Street, we all put our heads together and realized that that's not only a statewide conversation, but a national conversation, because many states suffer from a sinkhole event, even though many of the veins are different or the causes are a little bit different. But still, when that happens, it doesn't always rise to the level of a designation of national disaster or statewide disaster. And our funders sometimes use that designation to allow for funds to come to a disaster event. So how do you get to that disaster event? Usually it's a flood or tornado, some act of nature, but they don't categorize sinkhole events as disasters. So it leaves a community with needs and limited resources, but yet we can't access those funds that normally would go to a disastrous event. And we know that the state level has different levels before you can access certain funds, again declaring an area a disaster. And then of course at the federal level, then it's usually a disaster declared by the president or some other agency, and usually triggered by the local people saying it's a disaster. And also there are price tags at each level, so what was the cost or what would be the cost. So more importantly, we wanted people across the state and the nation to kind of come together and have that discussion as to what happens in each community and how can you address it and what are the resources needed, not only for the road itself and the infrastructure, but of course for the people who are affected by that, because you still have the same emergencies. You have a housing issue, you have shelter, you have immediate, you have long-term, and again, what's going to happen in the long term to those people who are homeowners or residents in that neighborhood. And again, looking just even locally, we noticed that in other areas of central Pennsylvania that have suffered from sinkholes, usually the community or the municipality doesn't address the homeowner issue. They have enough, crises in just trying to deal with the road, and so the homeowners are generally left with very, very little resources. So that was part of the impetus behind having a sinkhole summit, is to actually bring people together to talk about it, to find out where there might be some sources of funding. And again, we go to the state has been a good partner in some of our other issues, and so what are the sources and resources there? We go to PEMA. And again, they don't really look at sinkholes as a disastrous event, but are there some resources that we might be able to say, yes, for this or that, certain activities might be able to access certain funds, and that's what we're trying to identify.
That's right. I think both Spotlight Harrisburg, examine possible funding sources, but also connect Harrisburg to Palmyra and the rest of Pennsylvania, which is dealing with similar natural disasters. Wayne, let's talk numbers. I know Gannett Fleming put out some pretty staggering initial cost estimates. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. So let's talk about the parties that would be affected.
Mm-hmm.
Capital Region Water owns the water line. All right. So the water line, we talked about the one repair detail involving the grouting and things like that. That cannot be done with water lines, because you have a water line down the center, and then you have water lines going to each home. You also have gas lines in there. So UGI is the gas service company. They're also a party affected by this. Those gas lines would have to be temporarily removed if that option were to be implemented. The homeowners, right? They're obviously an affected party. There are certain homes, I think 9, have shown structural defects, foundation crackings, doors that don't open or close quite the way they were designed to do, that are attributed to the sinkhole activity. And then finally the city of Harrisburg, who's responsible for the safe passage on the streets and sidewalks. So those are the affected parties. If we sort of add up everyone's, what's the cost of the community, and we just sort of lump all that into one cost, For the one alternative, the compaction grouting, which is the same method used in one of the Palmyra sinkholes, the cost to the community is about a little over $2 million. Probably closer to 3, actually. If I do the final numbers, I don't have all UGI's numbers, but you know, relocating gas lines is not cheap. I know that. The other alternative, which would basically be buying out and relocating homes, is closer to the $4 million range.
And I think it's important to note we're dealing with about 50 homes. Is that correct on both sides of 14th Street?
There's 55 homes on South 14th Street. I like to say that all 55 families are definitely affected because their road is currently closed. But the area that has the sinkhole activity is probably closer to 32 homes.
Right. So if you went with option 2, which was a combination of demolition and relocation of the water and gas lines and creation of a green space, that would obviously affect all the homes, but we're looking at more like 60% of the homes as opposed to all the homes on the block.
Correct.
Right.
I think the numbers is exactly 27, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Jackie, if people have been watching this show and are interested in finding out more and they want to tune in to the Sinkhole Summit here on Channel 20, what will they see? Can you walk us through some of the panels that we've put together and some of the folks that we are coming to share their knowledge?
Well, we have professionals on geological studies and who know about sinkholes and can probably talk to the geological and technical issues of how they form and what causes them. And then we also have some funders. We have DCD and other local and federal people who might come and speak to us about the resources that might be able to be accessed depending again on certain activities. And then we have our legislators who, of course, we're hoping to bring attention to this issue so that they can address it from the legislative side and maybe do some legislative work for the future. Because if we know that the ground and the water are going to be causing these kinds of issues all across the state, then there'll be other areas that are going to be affected in the future. And so what will happen? We'll try to be a little more proactive on addressing these issues.
I want to thank you both for coming and helping speak to the public about this issue today. I want to thank all of you for watching at home. This is a continuing conversation that we're going to be having in Harrisburg. We wanted to bring you some information about what our immediate response has been, what our plans are for the future, in the hopes that we can better inform you. If you have additional topics for future Word in the Burgs, I hope you'll email them to us at wordintheburg@cityofhbg.com. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Word in the Burg.